Pope Francis sat down with Norah O'Donnell of CBS News for an hour-long exclusive. She touched a range of topics and still managed to miss the mark. And the Vatican has issued a new directive on Marian apparitions. What does it say? Here with analysis is the editor-in-chief of thecatholicthing.org and one-third of the papal posse, Robert Royal. Bob, thank you for being here.
Great,
now, this was allegedly Pope Francis's first in-depth interview with the U.S. broadcast network. I guess they forgot about David Muir sitting down with the Pope in 2015 at the Vatican. I didn't. Anyway, Bob, O'Donnell asked the Pope about the ordination of women, specifically female deacons.
I'm curious, for a little girl growing up Catholic today, will she ever have the opportunity to be a deacon and participate as a clergy member in the church?
No.
I understand you have said no women as priests, but you are studying the idea of women as deacons. Is that something you're open to?
Si es diáconos con orden sagrado, no.
If it is deacons with holy orders, no. But women have always had, I would say, the function of deaconesses without being deacons, right?
La mujer tiene un gran servicio como mujer.
Women are of great service as women, not as ministers. As ministers in this regard within the holy orders.
Bob, your thoughts on what we heard there? I mean, he's deliberately and definitively shut down holy orders for women. But what about some other kind of non-ordained deaconesses here?
Yeah, look, this is a problem that we've seen many times in this papacy, that he says the right thing about the doctrine, about the disciplines, about the tradition of the church, and then in the next breath, he opens up a door, and then we wonder why people are confused about what's going on. He had this nun who talked about female deacons, deaconesses,
right,
who spoke to the group of cardinals who are his closest advisors, and she came out and said he wants to have deaconesses, but he just doesn't know about the form. And I think that what he's looking to is that women will serve in certain capacities, but the question down the line is going to be, are those capacities going to begin to tread on what we think of as what deacons do? And we know from the dynamic inside the church, that's where people are going to want it to head. And the ultimate goal is, of course, priesthood.
Well, look, this is the incrementalism we've been seeing all along. We've seen it in many, many other areas, including the one we're going to talk about in a moment. But once you say, well, Sarah, you're a deacon now, or a deaconess, you're only a breath away from the ceremony, and they're going to be demanding it, and then where's equality, and why are you discriminating against women? I mean, it opens up a whole can of worms. So I understand what he's saying here. I'm not sure. I think it may be a preview, actually, of the synod we're going to see. But stay tuned for that. Bob O'Donnell also asked Pope Francis about the idea of blessing same-sex couples. Watch.
Last year, you decided to allow Catholic priests to bless same-sex couples. That's a big change. Why?
No, what I allowed was not to bless the union. That cannot be done because that is not the sacrament. I cannot. The Lord made it that way. But to bless each person, yes. The blessing is for everyone. For everyone. To bless a homosexual-type union, however, goes against the given right, against the law of the Church. But to bless each person, why not? The blessing is for all. Some people were scandalized by this, but why? Everyone, everyone.
Bob, the Pope corrected O'Donnell here on the notion and the nature of the blessing. But what is the difference, by all appearances? Nobody's scandalized by everyone getting a blessing. We had that all along. This document, we should say this, and Norah O'Donnell should have posed this to the Pope, and she didn't. Then why do you need a document saying couples can come forward, not individuals, couples, to be blessed? I'll let you talk.
Yeah, well, you're assuming that this would be a really probing interview.
Or an interview at all.
When in fact, this is a series of basically softball questions, let's say it. And God bless Norah O'Donnell. There's a certain deference toward the papacy, which it's good to see someone in the secular world at least doing that. But look, when this sort of thing begins to happen, what we're obviously seeing is that there's an attempt for the Holy Father to kind of split the difference in a way that is not going to alienate the secular world. But I actually went back and I looked at Fiducia Supplicans, and I wish Father Murray was here because he's got chapter and verse. There are 9 different places where it talks about couples.
Yeah,
regular
it doesn't
couples.
say individual.
So it doesn't just say individuals. So you're exactly right. You can always bless individuals, 2, 3, 5, however many come in.
Yeah.
But there's clearly the attempt to kind of suggest something here, and maybe it'll continue down the line and end up somewhere else.
Everyone gets a blessing. It's called the end of Mass, but I'll leave it there. Pope Francis was also asked about sexual abuse cases in the church. This was interesting.
You have done more than anyone to try and reform the Catholic Church and repent for years of unspeakable sexual abuse against children by members of the clergy. But has the Church done enough?
It must continue to do more. Unfortunately, the tragedy of the abuses is enormous. And against this, an upright conscience. And not only to not permit it, but to put in place the conditions so that it does not happen. It cannot be tolerated. When there is a case of a religious man or woman who abuses, the full force of the law falls upon them. In this, there has been a great deal of progress.
Well, Bob, I was shocked that, again, O'Donnell offered no follow-up here. The follow-up should have been, and even a casual viewer would understand this, how can you say the full force of the law falls upon anyone guilty of this when you, Your Holiness, protected your friend, Bishop Sanchetta, and the disgraced Jesuit Marco Rupnik? Just this week, and I'm going to put it on the screen, the Vatican even used Rupnik's artwork on the website for a Marian feast day. Your thoughts, Bob?
Yeah, I'm glad that he said this. I wish that we had a follow through on it, but it seems that clericalism that he constantly denounces is at work when it comes to people who are close to him or at least are high up in the church hierarchy in one way or another. And yes, look, we have to. I'm absolutely convinced that CBS is a serious enough news organization that it must know about the Rupnik case, because that is notorious. We're talking about women who were abused in the confessional, in Mass, through blasphemies, through utterly terrible things. Yeah. And if we're talking about protecting women and protecting young people and whatnot, that must be something that a news organization knows about. So they chose not to go ahead and pursue that. So what can we say about this? He's talking the good game. He's not walking the talk.
Pope Benedict laicized something like 3,000 priests as CDF, and then at the CDF, and then as Pope. If he had been guilty of this sort of thing, where a personal spiritual son had been protected by him while they were and protected from the process, the canonical process, which Sanchetta has been protected from, to say nothing of this Rupnik character, I promise you CBS and every other news operation would have correctly brought that up if they'd been given the opportunity to sit in his face. This is a dereliction of duty. Again, I've said this again and again. It's a dereliction of duty on the part of the media when we don't hold these people accountable when we have the opportunity to do so. The Pope was also asked about Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's efforts to shut down Annunciation House, a large migrant shelter on the U.S.-Mexico border. Now, the Texas AG alleges that the facility encourages migrants to enter the U.S. illegally. Here's the question.
The state of Texas is attempting to shut down a Catholic charity on the border with Mexico that offers undocumented migrants humanitarian assistance. What do you think of that?
That is madness, sheer madness. To close the border and leave them there, that is madness. The migrant has to be received. Thereafter, you see how you're going to deal with them. Maybe you have to send him back. I don't know. But each case ought to be considered humanely.
Bob, your reaction. And do states and federal governments not have a right to enforce their borders?
Yeah, I'm sure it's not only that Catholic institution that is encouraging people to come. And that's the dimension that I think he misses about this immigration question. He's always just taking it as if it's a snapshot of individual people that are going to be received, when in fact, this is a much broader problem. Pope Benedict talked about the right not to have to emigrate, that people ought to have countries that they can remain in. I remember during the Synod on Youth, they were talking even during the Synod itself about the devastation it has on the countries that their most talented citizens leave from.
Yeah.
So it's a much bigger problem than he's trying to portray there. And look, you don't want to encourage people to break the law. I think, look, we have so many people landing on the border. We have to do something about them. But is it okay for them to be let into the country, breaking the law as they come into the country? Is it good for the country itself? If you think that you need to do some moral reasoning about these situations, it's got to be more than just anybody who shows up is welcome to come in and then we'll sort it out
Well,
later.
and this is also journalistically irregular, because what isn't mentioned here is these aren't people seeking protection from where they live. These aren't families coming. I just saw the report earlier today at the San Diego crossing. Pakistanis, Iranians, Chinese nationals. These are not refugees. These are people coming for a different purpose. We have to figure out what it is, and we need to stop it at the border to just say, who are you? Why are you coming? That's what the country is obligated to do by law. Of course, O'Donnell asked Pope Francis about his conservative critics, particularly those in the big old bad USA.
There are conservative bishops in the United States that oppose your new efforts to revisit teachings and traditions. How do you address their criticism?
You used an adjective, conservative. That is, conservative is one who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude. Because one thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past, but quite another is to be closed up inside a dogmatic box.
Bob, people locked in those dogmatic boxes. What do you make of this comment?
Well, I make it that you and I are probably fairly conservative fellows. You probably would apply that label to us.
I'm not in any
And
box,
if you-
baby. I don't know where you are.
Look, the whole question of conservatism and liberalism doesn't really apply in the church the way it does in politics. But that said, everybody is both a conservative and a liberal. I mean, you conserve not just in some sort of psychologically damaged way, you're clamped down on something. It's like Obama talking about people clinging to guns and religion. Remember that famous remark? We're talking about holding on to those permanent truths, those eternal truths that have been conveyed to us by God. Naturally, of course, we all also deal with the situations that we're in. I think it's kind of slanderous, actually, for the Holy Father to say, and I'm sorry to have to say this, but I think it's just true, that to think of conservatives as somehow people who are psychologically unwilling to live in the world. That's not any. There are obviously people who are liberal and conservative who have psychological problems.
Yeah.
But that's not really the general run of conservatives that I'm familiar with.
You know what the right answer is, and the one he should have offered was, let me stop you. We don't consider conservative liberal boxes when talking about the eternal deposit of faith of Jesus Christ. It is eternal. It is both liberal, conservative, and everything in between. It's the alpha and the omega. That's who we are. So I reject those political titles, Nora. Let's move on. That's where you start. But to double down on them, you really are, you're placing, dare I say it, your critics and your friends in your own dogmatic box. That is, I think, to confirm the media narrative. That's never a good thing. But perhaps running counter to this here, I'm not even going to talk about, let's put the philosophical analysis aside, but running counter to the Pope's assessment, or Nora O'Donnell's, a recent study of young priests in Germany reveals that they don't seem to have much of a stomach for the progressive German synodal way. About 75% of new priests in Germany oppose women's ordination. About 70% support priestly celibacy. The study was organized by the German Bishops' Conference and the Bochum Center for Applied Pastoral Research, and it surveyed priests ordained between 2010 and 2021. Bob, this poll and the organizers are chalking this up to these young men being out of touch with modern society and lacking creativity. What do you see here?
Well, there are many ways in which it's good to be out of touch with modern society. It's not as if we have to swallow everything that's going on out there in the world. And look, along with the surveys that we've had of younger priests in the United States as well, if you're in Rome and looking at who are my best guys, who are my...
Where's the future?
Yeah, where's the future? Where are my shock troops? Who are the guys who are going to go out and evangelize? You've got the United States, which has a very dynamic Catholic Church in spite of all the problems that we have. You have Germany, which is in utter turmoil, and yet the people who are actually being ordained, I don't think that they're going to get a large crop of ordinations if they become liberal the way that the German synodal way would like to go. So you're either facing a suicide of the church. I mean, he's talked about conservatism as suicide.
We have an exclusive interview with the Pope to share with you. This was recorded late last year. It's only being shown now for the first time on television. This is the Pope being interviewed by Italian journalist Alessandro Iovino and Protestant pastor Giovanni Trattino, an ecumenical evangelical leader. Now, as a way to set this up, I want to refer back to Norah O'Donnell, who said of the Pope's choice of dwelling at the Casa Santa Marta, the guest house built in the 90s, it's not what Francis wears, but where he lives. That set the tone of the papacy 11 years ago. Instead of a palace above St. Peter's Square in Vatican City, the Pope chose to live in the Vatican guest house, Casa Santa Marta, Ms. O'Donnell said. Alessandro Iovino asked Pope Francis why he lives at the Vatican's guest house. Listen to the answer. Pope Francis, you have stated that you chose to live here in Casa Santa Marta because you want to be surrounded by friends. What does this mean? And how much has the friendship with Pastor Giovanni influenced you? And Pope Francis says, I cannot imagine what life would be like without friends. Friendship is a gift from the Lord. It is a gift that always makes both parties grow, and the friend seeks to help the other friend grow often, giving them precedence because friendship is so kind and deep. It makes peace. For me, this is the most beautiful thing about friends, peace. On the other hand, enmity leads to wars. Now, Bob, we've been talking about this Casa Santa Marta versus the Apostolic Palace for 11 years. I think it's a tired old media creation. Your comments and tie in what the Pope says here and the depiction of CBS News on his living arrangement.
Yeah, I mean, he even said further that psychologically he just needs to be around people, and he felt that if he was up in the Apostolic Palace, I mean, you and I have both been in there, and it's a very modest. From the outside, it's very big.
Yeah, beautiful.
But inside, it's a very
the
modest.
papal apartment. I mean, we have to say, John Paul and Benedict. I saw it with my own eyes. They slept in little single beds. Tiny little beds in this drafty old palace built in the 16th century. I mean, if it were up to me, Bob, I'd stay in the new, 1990s Hilton too.
No, but you're right. There's a way in which sort of this media concoction of, he's there, and it's humble because he's there. And look, he is in many ways a humble man. Mm-hmm. He's also a very self-assertive man in a lot of ways as well. But they want to do that. They want to kind of continue this media narrative that he's opened up the church to gays and to trans people and more women. And so it makes him look like he's a progressive, even though when he actually gets down to talking about specific principles, he'll still repeat those Catholic arguments. And no pope before him, for example, has ever said that getting an abortion is hiring a hitman. That is never highlighted in the Norah O'Donnell world.
Right. They didn't mention that line. In fact, that's a good segue. This being an ecumenical interview, Iovino asked Pope Francis about life, about abortion. Something that, to his credit, Pope Francis has always taught quite clearly. Iovino asks, is there life? Is there life? And Pope Francis says, from the moment of conception. And Iovino says, on this one must be clear. And he says, clear, there is life. If you terminate it, you take a life away. There is no qualification. Clear words, Pastor Giovanni? And Pastor Giovanni says, absolutely, yes. I was struck by the clarity of the Pope here. And I have to say, it's kind of refreshing to hear him so bluntly say these eternal truths.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not only about abortion. I mean, who else has really spoken out so repeatedly, even when he didn't absolutely have to, about gender ideology as being the kind of new form of colonialism and imperialism? I think that's very good rhetoric, because it takes that kind of progressive language about, well, we don't want to colonize other people's cultures, and it turns it against this progressivism that's really absolutely run wild in the United States and is beginning to run wild in Europe and elsewhere as well.
But then I think you see the confusion in the minds of the public because they hear that teaching, but then they see, you know, a group of trans people coming in and being blessed by the Pope and having letters written to them. So it's confusing to them. And it's not about excluding anybody, but it's the mixed messaging of what you're saying and what you're doing. It would be like me, you know, saying, oh, look, I love my kids, and then I go to dinner alone and don't invite anybody. I mean, it doesn't matter what you say. What is he doing? Yeah. And I do think that begs a larger question. New Vatican directives on Marian apparitions were released last week. This got very little coverage, I'm amazed, in the wider world. The document entitled Norms for Proceeding in the Discernment of Alleged Supernatural Phenomena replaces the procedures put in place by Pope Paul VI in 78. Now that it's been released, your thoughts on these new directives, and then we'll get into
it. Yeah, and we predicted a little while ago that this probably would be centralizing more power in Rome about what to do about these apparitions. And partly it's because in the new media environment, these things tend to run wild, and there are always a lot of religious hucksters in the world. And we certainly want to make sure that if we're going to tell people, look, that's a pilgrimage site, you can go there and have some spiritual benefit from it, we want to make sure that what they're getting when they're there is real Catholicism. So, look, it goes against the basic premise of Francis's papacy that he wants to decentralize.
Right.
But there are very clearly things about Catholicism that require Rome to be involved and maybe to make a decision even against some local.
Well, I mean, the most significant change here in these new norms is that it doesn't leave it to the local bishop any longer. Rome is deciding, or proving at least, the authenticity of these supernatural events. Is that a good thing?
Well, I mean, we hear, because we didn't know about this in the past, we hear that there used to be these back-channel conversations with the bishops, and no doubt bishops wanted to make sure that Rome was okay with decisions that they're going to be making. Clearly, the main issue that's now going to come to the fore is what to do about Medjugorje.
Right.
And we don't know what way that is going to fall out. It's been back and forth over the years with different popes, and presumably they're going to have to issue some kind of decision relatively soon.
And I wasn't going to talk about this, but Cardinal Fernandez did at the press conference bring up Medjugorje. I'll put on the screen what he said. He said, regarding Medjugorje, we'll see. For example, I haven't read the material available at the dicastery. I know these details, but we need to study to reach a conclusion with these new norms. Keep in mind that a phenomenon can be considered good, not dangerous at the origin, but it may have some issues as its later development. Therefore, sometimes a declaration needs to clarify these different stages. That's a distinction we need to consider. And then suppose there was a green light, a nihil obstat, we might also need to clarify that some details should not be taken seriously. If I remember correctly, the Madonna there was giving orders, setting the schedule, the place, what the bishop should do, etc. That needs to be clarified, Fernandez said. This sounds like a pullback on Medjugorje.
Yeah. My one worry about this is that this papacy has shown itself to be very careless with texts. So it says things. I mean, Fiducia Supplicans already created a disaster because of the confusions within the document itself, and the attempts at clarification and the attempts to calm things down. All that should have been done ahead of time.
Right.
And there are other documents that they've issued that had to be clarified within a few days because people pointed to problems that are there. So I hope they proceed very carefully with this. I don't have a lot of confidence in it because of their track record, but there's a reason why we have lawyers, canon lawyers, we have people who know doctrine, because when the church speaks, we want it to speak accurately, to convey the right messages. if you say one thing and do another, as we've been saying, you don't know what has been said or what's been communicated.
Bob, maybe there's a Serbian carve-out in the offing like the African bishops got from the same-sex blessings. If the bishops, grouse as a group, maybe they get a particular carve-out and Medjugorje will be just fine. The U.S. Church is spending, and this is a shocking figure, $50 million on this National Eucharistic Congress in Indiana in July. Various pilgrimages, processions have started all over the country, which is a beautiful thing. But meanwhile, in France, there is an organic Eucharistic revival underway. For nearly 1,000 years, pilgrims have been walking from Paris to Chartres in order to venerate one of the most sacred relics in all of Christendom, the Veil of Our Lady, kept at Chartres Cathedral. Now, the Chartres pilgrimage is a 3-day, 60-mile walk that takes place each year to commemorate the Feast of Pentecost, or they end on the Feast of Pentecost. This past week, to conclude the pilgrimage, 20,000 Catholics attended a traditional Latin Mass at the cathedral, celebrated by Cardinal Gerhard Mueller. Bob, what's most significant in your mind about this pilgrimage? I mean, aside from the large number of people, and I'll bet it didn't cost them anywhere near $50 million.
Look, I've been wanting to do this,
me too.
this pilgrimage, but they get so-called sold out. I mean, they had 18,000 people who were registered. That was the absolute maximum. They have to control it, through the streets from Paris to Chartres. And a lot of these people on pilgrimage were young people.
Yeah, it's all kids.
It seems to be that there's, as we've said before about Latin masses and some of the traditions, people are looking for something in this chaos of postmodernity. And they see something like this that's been going on for hundreds and maybe 1,000 years, and it's beautiful, and they get out and they're together with other people, and it's got a. I was talking with a priest the other day who just went through the American pilgrimage. The Eucharistic procession came through his parish, and he said, other than his ordination, it was one of the most beautiful experiences he's ever had in the church. Yeah. So, look, these things energize people.
They do.
We never know where these seeds are going to fall and what kind of fruit they're going to produce. It's absolutely wonderful, and it happens in a lot of places. I run a program in the Slovak Republic every year. We have to be careful the way we time it when we get out to the eastern part of Slovakia, because there's a Marian pilgrimage to this hillside shrine that attracts 100,000 people every July. You've never heard of it. It's in Levocha. And they're not the only ones.
It's incredible. And I think young people, over the weekend, somebody sent me pictures of the Chartres pilgrimage. They were actually on it. And they said, it's amazing. People are telling us, we're returning to the past. I said, no, you're rushing to the eternal. That's really what this is. This is a rush to the eternal. It's what young people instinctively have in them. They want to be part of something countercultural and something that roots them to a lasting root, to something that lasts and perdures. And I think that's what this Chartres pilgrimage is. But a snapshot of, and the Latin Mass perhaps a larger piece of this same movement. So no matter what people say, what they do, I guess we're tying this up nicely, Bob, what people do is ultimately, I think, far more important. And we're seeing beautiful actions from the faithful and particularly young Catholics. Robert Royal, we will leave it there. For more commentary by Bob and Father Gerald Murray of happy memory, visit thecatholicthing.org. He'll be back. He's fine. He was traveling this week, or we would have had him here.